Hi all, welcome to the latest installment of the Ernix webinar series. We're going to get it started in just a minute, give a few more moments for others to join in, and we'll be back with you in a minute.
Change the channel. Listen.
Welcome everyone. I'm your host, Drew Lawyer with Ernix. I head our professional services practice here in North America. Excited to be moderating this webinar for you today. Before we get started, a few quick housekeeping items. All attendees are going to be silenced through the entirety of this presentation. At the end of the webinar, we will have time for questions. If you have questions, you can post them in the tab on the right-hand side of your screen, and I'll facilitate those at the end of the presentation. If you run into any technical difficulties along the way, please feel free to send an email to victor.vlad@ernix.com. So with that, welcome to the third installment of the Ernix Thought Leadership webinar series targeting the insurance industry ecosystem. Topic today is personalization in insurance, to be or not to be. Very excited today to be joined by Yaron Levy. He is our head of product here at Ernix, where his role is to bring huge ideas into the market. I was asking Yaron what he's most passionate about, and he's an avid mountain biker. It actually says some of his best ideas come to him while he's out there on the trails. Personally, I'm very excited about today's topic. I think personalization is something that I've been hearing a lot about in the market. There's some misconceptions, and I think Yaron is going to be able to shed some light on really what the future of this looks like and how we're all going to benefit. So with that, Yaron, the floor is yours.
Drew, thank you for the intro. Very happy to run you through this webinar series session today. So in terms of agenda, let's jump straight in. We're going to, first of all, start with essentially a definition of what product personalization in insurance is all about, why we believe it has to be part of your sales strategy, what you need as an organization to start personalizing, how to actually start and take the first step towards this personalization journey, and where it will ultimately take you. And then, as Drew had mentioned, hopefully at the end of the session, we'll have time for Q&A. Before we jump into the details, I'd like to define what is product personalization in insurance. And I think it's important to note that product personalization is not marketing personalization, and these two things are actually very different. And when we speak about personalization, there's in a lot of cases there's a mix between two. So product personalization is actually the personalization of the product that is being offered, that is being sold. So obviously in the case of insurance, it's the kind of the attributes, the components of, let's say, the insurance policy that's being offered and being sold. Marketing personalization is really the personalization of things like marketing messages. So, it's all about things like making sure that you get the right wording, the correct choice of words in a personalized email message, the right font size, maybe the right image on a website. But obviously these two things are very, very different. And we are going to focus exclusively on product personalization within insurance. So to kind of set the stage and explain what we kind of our view of personalized product personalization and a personalized sales experience, I'd like to start with an analogy of personalized retail sales experience. And I think all of us can relate in some way, shape, or form to Amazon as being a champion of personalizing a sales journey. I think what Amazon has done very well to a lot of us, certainly if you look at books, is personalizing the experience and giving you this kind of warm, intimate, personal feeling that you had at your favorite bookshop, maybe 20 or 30 years ago before we all went digital. And although someone like Amazon is very, very big, at the end of the day, what they're able to do is create a very intimate, personal experience where you feel that it's as if you have this kind of personalized book salesperson that knows you very well, knows exactly what it is that should be offered to you. And the idea in personalized insurance sales is actually very similar. The concept is to recreate the personal, intimate experience that you as an individual had experienced with, let's say, a human agent. And the best analogy that I have is always my parents' insurance agent. So my parents, they're technically savvy, but they still, for years and still today, they buy insurance through their insurance agent. And an insurance agent in that respect is someone who's known our family for many years, understands our needs, understands our requirements, also our risks, and is able to offer us a personalized offer that gives us this level of intimacy that what is being offered to us is what we actually need. Obviously, taking out a lot of the uncertainty and a lot of the potential perceived risk out of the sales journey or the sales experience. We believe as the world is becoming more and more digital, and examples of, let's say, this traditional human-based agent or broker that assists us in the sales process is becoming less and less a viable option. We believe that product personalization in a digital world must be part of your product sales strategy. It's not a nice to have, and there are a number of reasons for that. The first one is that there is now customers expect us to serve them personally. This is an expectation that has been brought about by, obviously, the Amazons of the world, the Facebooks of the world that we all know, that have created a very strong expectation that when we buy something that is complicated or that requires a lot of know-how, that someone selling this to us would cater to us personally with a personalized offer as opposed to a generalized offer. The second reason is what we call escape the digital commoditization paradox. And if you think about it, the more digital you are as an insurance company selling insurance digitally, the more the more you are successful in moving a lot of your business into direct digital channels, the more you run the risk of being commoditized, because you now offer a product, assuming that you offer a standardized kind of plain vanilla product, you're now at the risk of being commoditized and having consumers judge you purely based on price. And by the way, in some of the markets, we have, if you look at, let's say, the UK motor insurance business for new sales is being dominated by price comparison websites where you are judged almost exclusively based on price. And through personalization, what you can do is change it from a discussion that is based on price only to a discussion that is based on the actual attributes of the product, and making sure that you come up with a personalized offer that cannot be easily commoditized and cannot be easily just compared based purely on price. And the third reason that we believe that product personalization must be part of your strategy is around customer loyalty through personalization. We know that customers that the early adopters in insurance that are able to personalize actually gain some very, very significant benefits. The first thing is that, when you as an insurance provider, you sell a personalized package, the perceived value by the consumer is obviously much higher. Switching becomes much more difficult, and there are also other benefits. If we're looking at some early adopters in insurance personalization, we're actually seeing that in the motor insurance space, one of the first things that some of these early adopters that we've seen are doing is personalizing the actual riders and add-ons that they're selling beyond the core coverages that they offer. And through personalization of that, not only are they able to drive more conversions in digital, but they're actually able to sell more of these high profit, high margin add-ons. We see that there's a lot of value, but it's all driven by, I would say, digital sales and the centricity of digital sales. And I'd like to now go to our first question, our first polling question that you can see on your right-hand side. Very curious to see how the audience is attending today, seeing digital sales changing over the next 12 months. Are you seeing it decreasing or unchanged, growing slightly, growing significantly, or perhaps this is not applicable to you? I'll give you guys a few seconds to respond to that, and let's see where you are thinking that your market is heading.
So, Yaron, it's an interesting question because there's a lot of talk about digital sales and kind of turning into a digitally driven enterprise. But just because there's a lot of talk doesn't necessarily mean there's always action. So it seems like the results are coming in, and very, very few people are saying that it is going to decrease or remain unchanged. Very few people are saying it's not applicable. And the remaining look like they're pretty much split between growing slightly and growing significantly. So it seems like it's going up no matter what. We just have to figure out exactly how fast.
Okay, great. So thanks for that. That's interesting, and I mean, it's not surprising. I think that we're seeing, first of all, there's obviously a strong driver to grow digital sales. Some of it is obviously being reinforced by the current COVID-19 crisis, which is obviously accelerating the digital channels. As we'd mentioned, we believe that product personalization is a key driver in the ability to drive digital sales and support growth in this digital channel. So we defined this and we talked about the benefits. And the question is now, what do you need as an insurance company? What do you need to start personalizing your insurance offers? And so there are a number of different things that I'm going to cover. The first one is product variation, which means that if you want to personalize the product offer that is being offered to each consumer, you need to be able to vary the attributes or the components of the product to the requirements, the tastes, the likes, the preferences of each consumer. And so you need some product variation. And product variation comes in different forms. The first one is that, some of obviously the core coverages that we offer, whether it's home, whether it's car insurance, whether it's other lines of business, these obviously vary by things like coverage amounts, deductibles, etc. So there is some variation there. The second is obviously look at product variation by riders and add-ons. So most insurance companies obviously offer an interesting catalog of different riders and add-ons, and different consumers have different needs for them and different preferences. Actually, interesting to see, again, an example from some early adopters. We've seen some early adopters in insurance personalization that, as their first step towards personalized product personalization, have actually enriched the catalog of riders and add-ons from just a few to close to 20, with the outcome, with the target of being able to not offer everyone 20, because that gives you too much choice, but to be able to tune and essentially tailor and personalize the specific riders and add-ons that each consumer is likely to need and is likely to buy, in order to drive much more granular personalization. The third is around usage-based insurance policies. And when you talk about usage-based insurance, again, I think this is something that's gaining a lot of attention right now because of COVID-19, and the fact that many people, certainly in car insurance, are probably driving significantly less than they thought they will. This gives rise to a lot of potential product variation around usage-based policies. So think about, defining product variation, or lots of different variations around product, around how many miles you can drive, at what time of day, at what region, et cetera, et cetera. This gives you a huge level of product variation. And another fourth example, which is by no means an exhaustive list, because this list could go on, is actually around loyalty programs. And again, this is an example of something that we've seen with some early adopters. In order to differentiate, this is an example from, again, an early adopting personalizing insurance company that, in order to differentiate its offering, developed its own loyalty program of non-insurance offers, such as discount coupons and club memberships that are closely related to the type of insurance that they offer. And again, they built essentially a big catalog of different loyalty program components, with a guide, essentially with a goal of tuning and personalizing the package of insurance coverages, riders, as well as loyalty program items for each consumer to set themselves apart and to create more loyalty. So we talked about product variation. I'd like to now move to some of the rules. So obviously, in addition to product variation, or to drive product variation, we need analytics, we need rules that help us determine the right personalized offer for each customer. So you have a particular customer shopping for insurance, let's say car insurance or home insurance or pet insurance or what have you, and you need to determine what is it that is the right product package to offer them at that particular point in time. What does that require? So first of all, it requires various types of prediction models. These could be machine learning, artificial intelligence-based models that, based on past history and patterns, predict what customers are most likely to need, most likely to buy, and hence should be offered. Okay. There's obviously a lot of very rich data science that could go into that. In addition to that, we need to look at underwriting rules. So we talked about product variation and the ability to create different types of coverages and add-ons and maybe some other components. This has to be governed by underwriting rules, in the sense that perhaps there are policies that you as an insurance company want to ensure that you don't underwrite a certain risk or a certain add-on to a certain customer, or that under regulatory constraints, based on what a certain customer must be offered a personalized package that has to include certain components. So these types of underwriting rules need to also govern the personalization kind of logic or brains that power your personalization strategy. But it doesn't stop there. You need to look at risk-adjusted margins. So it's not just about understanding what product or what product variation is going to be the one that customers are most likely to buy, but it's also about looking at risk-adjusted margins. And we know that, obviously, in insurance, those risk-adjusted margins vary significantly across individuals based on their risk profiles. And these things must be taken into consideration when determining what is the right personalized offer for each customer, to make sure that, in theory, you're not offering a personalized package that seems on paper to be the right one that the customer is most likely to buy, but actually, let's say delivers negative margin. And lastly, when you look at this, you need to determine not just what product variation you have and what the model's underwriting rules and margins are, but you also need to understand how and when are your personalized offers being presented. And so just to give you an idea, let's say that you have someone shopping for car insurance on your website. It's very common for you to show up to present, let's say, 3 personalized offers: a silver, a gold, and a platinum, because it's a web page that allows you to display 3 personalized offers side by side. But if someone is buying through, let's say, through a mobile app, there's probably not a lot of real estate, and you need to offer just 1 personalized offer. So obviously that needs to be taken into consideration. Okay, so everything that you've seen here determines some of the rules, kind of the analytics and the rules to know what to offer. Now let's look at your organization. And when we look at personalization within insurance companies, one of the key success factors is actually establishing strong collaboration within your organization in teams that, across teams that typically don't need to collaborate on a day-to-day basis, or did not need to collaborate up until now. So here's an example. The sort of teams that usually need to get into the same room and come up with a joint personalization strategy include people like, your digital journey and digital marketing teams that build your digital strategies. However, they need to work side by side with your pricing actuaries, because we need to understand obviously the risk-adjusted margins, or the risk, the loss cost associated with different personalization strategies. And obviously you need, in kind of in the same team, in the same room, you also need people like product managers and business line managers that look at a product or a line of business, or maybe across the overall customer lifetime value. Now, these people need to collaborate. It's not that easy. I think that in many of the discussions that we've seen with insurance companies around personalization, we've seen that in a lot of cases, these different teams actually speak very different, have very different KPIs. So a digital marketing team may look at things like click-through rates and conversion rates. Your pricing and product teams may look at the GWP growth rates, or loss cost targets, things of that nature. So obviously very different KPIs, different views on the world, but they all need to collaborate because they're all working on the same thing, and personalization cuts across them. Now, we've talked about product variation, we talked about some analytical capabilities, we talked about different people that need to collaborate. But you need to make all of this together. You need to get true personalization in the organization. You need to make sure that all of this comes together through some kind of an end-to-end system, something we call end-to-end systemization. So a system that cuts across your entire organization, that makes sure that everything works together. And when we talk about everything, it needs to cut across a lot of things. So it needs to include the data that you have that drive your models, your predictive models. It needs to have some, a place to maybe test, develop, and run your personalization models that may be based on machine learning with a combination of business rules that would capture some of your underwriting logic. You then need to tie that with the product catalog that captures everything that you have around product variation. And obviously that it doesn't work in a silo. This all needs to be tied together. So it needs to be integrated with your channel and underwriting systems. So again, if you have someone who's coming to buy insurance from your website, someone wanting to buy motor insurance from your website, and at that point in time, you need to take all of this product catalog and models and data and determine what is the right personalized offer to them, and integrate and push that into the channel right away. And lastly, you need various types of collaboration tools and monitoring tools, because you want people from marketing, you want people from product, from the actuarial side, to all have a view of your personalization strategy, the resultant KPIs, performance metrics, etc., etc. So all of those things need to come together. Now, so we talked about everything, and kind of up until this point about systemization, bringing everything together, with the last point being around collaboration. And because I think this is a pretty challenging part, I'd actually like to raise a question right now. How well do you believe that your digital teams and your product and pricing teams are aligned and are able to work together? Are they siloed in the sense that you have a digital team that may be working on a set of separate KPIs, such as click-through rates, whereas your product and pricing teams have completely different KPIs? Do they have some basic alignment? Are they working in a true collaborative fashion where they all have defined common KPIs? Or do they reach the ultimate kind of integrated mindset where they're all sharing, all using the same integrated tools, KPI, in a fully integrated manner, able to share models, insights, etc.? I'll give you, we'll pause for a few questions. I'll let you provide your thoughts on this.
Yeah. So Yaron, this was one of those topics where when I worked back on the carrier side, it was one of the biggest challenges we always had, was the breaking down these business silos, especially something as holistic as something like personalization. Definitely seems like it has some unique challenges. So the results are rolling in. Not too surprisingly, it seems like we have roughly half of the respondents are saying they have some basic level of alignment. A few have a collaborative relationship. Very few have integrated relationships. And about a quarter of the respondents say that it's a fully siloed alignment.
Right. So yeah, I agree. And I think it's not surprising. So it's great to see that some of you have some collaboration, but typically we've seen that this very strong collaboration is something that in a lot of cases, when you adopt a personalization strategy, is something that needs to be established. These processes need to be reinforced, and a lot of education needs to occur to make sure that you're all using the same KPIs to arrive at the right personalization strategy. Now, we talked about some of the more foundational elements. I think in order to make personalization work, you also need very strong executive level support, because personalization is not just a tactic, it is a strategic initiative. And when we talk about executive level support, we're talking about, first, the willingness and to be proactive. So the willingness for you as an organization to know that you need to be proactive with reaching out to your customers with personalized offers, or proactively suggesting personalized offers to them, as opposed to waiting for them to tell you exactly what you need. To a lot of insurance companies, this is a big step, because sometimes there's a mindset change. Sometimes there are some regulatory hurdles that need to be touched in order to feel that you ought to be confident in your ability to be proactive. But I think our very strong suggestion is to be proactive, because if you don't, you're not going to start personalization. And if you don't do this quickly, then your competitors will. And I think you will be left behind. The second is to think in a very customer-centric role. And at the end of the day, personalization is really about the person, the customer, understanding the customer's true needs, understanding customer lifetime value, and not about product-related goals. Personalization strategy, in its essence, is really about understanding the customer and about catering to the customer, and actually about maximizing lifetime value from a customer in the very broad sense. And by the way, in a lot of cases, also cutting across different products. So you need to, one of the key benefits, if done correctly, from personalization is the ability to actually increase share of wallet, and not just treat product personalization in let's say motor insurance as separate from home insurance, but look at this from a customer perspective and understand what additional products you need to offer. And lastly, we think that for executives to be fully on board, they need to be what we call scenario based, which means that they need to look at different types of long-term personalization strategies and scenarios, look at different outcomes, simulations, proposed business outcomes that look at different personalization strategies over time, and use these scenarios to make informed business decisions. Okay? We think it's really, really important. So moving beyond, we talked about a lot of the components, and a lot of this can seem pretty, potentially pretty intimidating and pretty daunting. So the question is, what's the first step towards personalization? And it may seem that this is kind of difficult to reach, but actually, in many of the discussions that we've had with insurance companies, we've identified that it's actually pretty easy to identify what the first step is. First of all, you can start with your current product variation. Although we said that the more product variation you have, the better, we found that in the vast majority of cases, the current variation that you have in your product today is sufficient to start on a personalization strategy. So start with the current product variation, and also map your current digital buying journey. So don't rebuild a complete journey. Look at it today and identify where you can inject an initial level of personalization into the current journey. Okay, and that is really the first step. And in order to make this very concrete, what I like to do is kind of jump into a demonstration. So what you see here is a typical customer buying journey for car insurance, for motor insurance. You start off with providing your information, the customer information. Then you provide things like the vehicle information, some driving information. You may provide some additional information on additional vehicles and drivers, et cetera, et cetera. Now at this point, and obviously this varies by insurance company, this varies by market, but at this point you are typically presented with something like this. You are then presented with, in the next step, before you're giving an actual quote, you need to select your coverages. Okay. Now, so the sort of things that you need to determine are things like, property damage liability, bodily injury liability. By the way, this is a very US example. I know that on this webinar we have people from across the entire globe, but there is a lot of variation that obviously is required in pretty much any market. And if you think about these different questions, and it's not just these, there are lots of other questions, what happens at this stage is that although technically a consumer can select exactly what they need, you're now presenting them with a choice of hundreds or maybe thousands of different combinations. And the majority of consumers find this to be completely intimidating. And what you get is one of two outcomes. Either you have actually pretty low conversion rates, so people will get to this screen and either would abandon it or complete the transaction on the phone. Or what a lot of insurance do is actually, instead of offering all of these different options, they offer, like, they pre-package these variations along and they call them, silver, let's say, silver standard, the gold, silver, gold, and platinum offers, where these selections are pre-selected for you. But pretty much all consumers would receive the same silver, gold, and platinum. Now, we don't think that it needs to be work this way. And I think that this is, if you take this type of journey, this is exactly where we are proposing to inject the first level of depersonalization. And the idea is that instead of providing all of these different offers, what you do, and asking you all these questions, is that you present a personalized auto policy bundle where you as an insurance company have selected each of these attributes for the insurance, for the consumer. And actually, not only do you do that, but you can actually also give the consumer the rationale of why each of these was selected, because there's probably a very good reason why you select one over the other. By the way, I'd like to maybe dwell on the first two, bodily injury and property damage. In the US, at least, the selection is based pretty much on on your personal assets. Well, I, as an insurance company, know a lot about you because you've given me information about where you live, how old you are, what car you drive. There's a lot of very rich information that gives me a lot of insights into what it is that you're most likely to need and to buy. And the same is true for any other component. And so the idea is really to take the existing insurance kind of personalization strategy, digital journey that you have today, and create this level of personalization, which would provide a tremendous amount of value almost right away into your existing journey. So this is an example of a first step. It's kind of it's a relatively small step in the sense that it preserves your existing product variation and a lot of your current digital journey. But obviously, this is something that you can take way beyond that. And question is, where will this ultimately lead you into? And obviously, we can run with our imagination, but here's one example. You sign in. And after you sign in, we take all of the information that we have about you. We know what insurance you've had to date. We have any additional information that you had agreed to share with us. We know everything about you in terms of lifestyle, et cetera, et cetera. And based on that, instead of offering you just one particular policy, we actually offer you a fully tailored, personalized bundle across all of your insurance needs and across your entire lifestyle. So in this case, based on your needs, we're putting together an auto bundle, a travel bundle, and a home bundle. And each of these is tailored and customized using a lot of very detailed data sources that we have, lots of different models, lots of different analytics and insights. We've seen the auto bundle that we've offered previously, okay, which is tailored. But look at let's say the travel bundle. We've actually included some travel insurance. And if you could look here, we've also thrown in airport lounge access, because based on what we know about you as an individual, this is probably something that you value to a large extent. It's obviously not insurance related, but we know that this kind of offer, when being offered proactively, creates a very high level of loyalty. And if we look at home bundle, it's not just about the traditional home insurance bundles. We've also added, in this case, for example, appliance warranty. Maybe it's something that we don't offer today. Maybe it's something that we resell from a third party, but we know is something that you are likely to need and to buy, and will create this extra level of value to us, value to the consumer, and obviously drive additional loyalty. And in terms of the way that this could be powered, there are lots and lots of very advanced analytical methods and additional data sources that could be used. You could look at advanced machine learning models. You could look at very granular geospatial data. In the motor insurance space, you could look at analyzing telematics data to understand the true nature of what it is that you are likely to need. Okay. This is kind of maybe a glimpse into the future. By now, hopefully, you've seen that there's tremendous value in product personalization, both in the short term, in the long term. And at this point, I'd like to turn to the third and final poll question. Based on what you've seen here, what do you believe are the top business goals that you would be considering in order to drive product personalization within your insurance company? Is it about just increasing revenues or margins? Is it about improving customer experience? Is it about accelerating adoption of digital? Or perhaps none of these? Very interesting, very curious to see where your minds are.
Yeah, just like any transformative methodologies or technologies, there's always like a ton of benefits to them, but different benefits really speak to different companies, different organizational structures. So it seems like the results are trickling in. Looks like it's starting to converge where about half the respondents are saying biggest benefit would be to improve the customer experience. About 40% are saying increase revenues and margin. Not very many are saying not applicable, and then 10% saying to accelerate the adoption of digital.
Okay, so very interesting. It's sort of like, Drew, you're absolutely right in the sense that there are lots and lots of benefits. And I think that the fact that we have a split here between 1 and 2 is perhaps a testimony to the fact that actually product personalization most likely delivers on both of these benefits, and provides value not just in one of them, but in both. Okay, so before we turn over to questions, I'd like to give you 2 key takeaways around product personalization. The first one is that in digital, personalization is strategic. I think it's important to note, to think about the fact that this is not about just growing digital more, but it is in fact providing strategic value. It's about providing more revenue for you as a company as a whole. It is not just about just a better digital experience. It is providing tremendous value. And the second thing is about product personalization. It is actually a journey. Product personalization, we've seen, we can show you where you can start and where it could ultimately take you. It's a journey, but there is a first mover advantage, because the earlier you start this, the more you're able to start testing out different personalization strategies and start from the first step that we showed you all the way to the ultimate step, where you can create a lot of value and you can elevate this to a huge strategic value. And because this is a long journey, and because there is a lot of learning, we believe there's a strong first mover advantage. And our recommendation is to start with this personalization strategy now. Okay, so those are the 2 key takeaways from today. I think what I'd like to do now is, I think we have a few more minutes, so I'd like to turn this to Drew for some questions that may have come up. Drew, over to you.
Yeah, absolutely. There's been quite a few questions rolling in, so we'll get to a few of them. I don't think we're going to have time to get through all of these, but one was around, how does personalization work without asking the customer 1,000 questions? So this kind of actually goes hand in hand with another question, was where you actually get all this data from. So how does this fit cleanly within that business process without asking the customer a million questions? And where's that data come from?
That's an excellent question. And in fact, from what we've seen, you can start personalizing without having to enforce customers to provide additional data. And the reason is because they're already providing you with a lot of data. I mean, think about it this way. We showed a customer journey. This journey is part of a quoting process, right? And so in order to get a quote, you're already asking a customer to submit quite a lot of detailed information. So the information that is already provided in order to generate this price proposal, this quote, actually contains a lot of very rich information that you could use for personalization. And I'll give you one very simple example. So look at things like, address, um, date of birth, and let's say the car that you own in case of motor insurance. Those three pieces of information could be viewed in two completely different ways. So, I could look at where you live and understand what's your risk profile, but I could also look at where you live and what car you drive and understand and make a very, very well-informed guess about things like, the assets that you own, your lifestyle, your buying preferences, things of that nature. So the information that you need to start off is probably already there. It's just a matter of having the ability to interpret it in a different way, a personalization view as opposed to let's call it an actuarial or a risk-focused view. And so I think that would be the first view. The second question is around, perhaps there was another question around data. You obviously want to build, when you talk about data, it's not just the data that the customer is providing. You also need to have some kind of historical data to power models. Typically, you need to, in a lot of cases, well, this is split. Some insurers have better data, some insurers have less data. Typically, there is some internal data that you have to kickstart the development of some initial models. If there isn't, you need to start building some kind of data aggregation, data storage capabilities. Okay.
Awesome. No, that's very informative. Thank you. So, another question is around different lines of business. So, is there a certain lines of business that this applies to more? If my company is getting ready to start on this journey, what would be a great line of business to start with?
Okay, so it's a great question. I think, first of all, we talked about, I'd say the following. I think that typically the main lines of business on personal lines, typically motor insurance, car insurance, home insurance, pet insurance typically contain sufficient product variation to allow personalization, and could be good starting points. I think what we've seen is in a lot of cases, travel insurance contains less of that variety. And so sometimes travel insurance is a very, very simplified product with very few variations that may not be a good candidate to start off with. And then if we kind of had to drill down within personal lines on P&C across, motor, home and pet, that really depends on where. Typically, we would start off where you have a volume of digital business that you can start and to see value. And within those three, it's really where the volume lies. Typically we'd start off where you have sufficient volume.
Awesome, good. So I think we have time for one more question. So I'm going to close out with one, maybe is a little provocative, put you on the spot, your own. But so you went through all the advantages of personalization, why it's a great thing. What would you say is the main disadvantage for personalization?
Wow, it's a great question. I think that there is, first of all, you need to, as with anything, you need to be able to test out different personalization strategies in the market, okay? And what that means is that in the short term, you're likely to try out different personalization strategies, and some of them, until you fine tune your strategy, will fail. And I think you need to take a long-term view and be able to take some kind of a short-term risk in trying out. Let's say you have 3 or 4 candidate personalization strategies. You need to be ready to accept the fact that when you start out, if you don't have sufficient data, sufficient experience, maybe 1 or 2 of those candidate strategies are going to fail. Okay, and so that's kind of a price that you have to be willing to pay in order to start the personalization strategy and fine tune the way that you go, which means that in the short term, you may be taking some kind of a hit. Obviously, you need to do that in a controlled fashion, but unless you're willing to take some of that risk up front, you're probably not ready to start the personalization strategy.
Yeah. Great point. So within any new transformative methodologies, there's a certain level of unknown. So it's really adapting to the test and learn methodology. So awesome. Well, Yaron, thank you so much for sharing sharing your guidance, wisdom, knowledge with everyone. For those of you who submitted questions that we weren't able to get to, we will get back to you individually. I'm sure Yaron would love to stay in touch. You're also welcome to reach out to Yaron directly if you want to continue the conversation, ask more questions, or just Yaron's one of those fun guys to just honestly have a collaborative brainstorming conversation with. So don't hesitate to reach out to him if you want to continue the dialogue. So thank you all for attending. This was a very compelling presentation. I know I certainly learned a lot. Join us for the next session in the Ernix webinar series, taking governance into your own hands, how to stay in control of your post-COVID-19 insurance operations. Governance and compliance is one of those topics that doesn't always get a lot of press, but I've certainly learned to have a much greater appreciation for it. So look forward to seeing you all in the next session. Take care. Have a great afternoon.